The Ukrainian armed forces have unleashed an apocalypse for the occupiers. Russia is losing Crimea and Donbas. Trump has shaken the world. Erdogan is deciding the fate of the war in Ukraine. Putin's little green men are already at NATO's doorstep. The alliance is on the brink of war. Kaliningrad, get ready. Transnistria is in the crosshairs. The Ukrainian armed forces are preparing a hellish operation. Watch until the end. Ukraine welcomes you today. Rinat Aslanov here with the latest events. Crimea is being torn apart by explosions, drones flew by like shadows of death, and the peninsula instantly burst into flames. The occupiers are fleeing this hell in all directions. Our sights are set on the Feodosia Marine Oil Terminal. The occupiers had barely caught their breath after the previous rout, and now there's a new strike.
When the oil depot in Feodosia was hit on October 6th, the day before Putin's birthday, not a single Russian official in Crimea said a word about it for 4 days while it burned.
This time the strikes hit 5 storage tanks at once. The self-proclaimed head of Crimea, Aksionov, is in a panic. The fire broke out instantly, and social media is howling that the smoke from the burning oil depot in Feodosia stretched all the way to Kerch and even further across the strait.
It's all burning right now. There are 6 or 7 spots on fire. More.
No, that's it. We can see the parallel ones, the ones right next to each other. It looks like the blackout has finally reached Crimea. The Cafe substation in Feodosia couldn't withstand the heated encounter with our forces. The power bridge between the Russian Federation and the peninsula seems to be on its final journey.
The substation is a key node in Crimea's power supply, handling most of the power from the energy bridge and also distributing electricity between the northern and eastern parts of the peninsula.
Things have been tense since last night in Simferopol, where the occupiers' critically important substation took the hit. The Russians let their guard down, and in Russia's Rostov region, it's a full-blown party.
Closer to 4 a.m., a series of explosions rocked the western outskirts of the city. The consequences are being clarified. Official Rostov remains silent.
It seems that temporarily occupied Donetsk has picked up the baton. Peace is just a dream for the occupiers. A series of explosions and a fire on the bypass road. Our drones gave the enemy a quest with a taste of gunpowder.
Whoa! Unbelievable. Guys.
Locals report a fire in the area of the former ocean near the Slavyansk-Donetsk-Mariupol bypass road.
It seems to be getting bigger.
According to the Russians, there was smoke, but repeated detonations can be heard all over the area.
I won't give it to you. I won't give it. I simply won't give it. I absolutely won't give it. Yes, indeed.
Right now, Ukrainian strikes are tearing at the heart of Russia. An unexpected strike by our forces has shaken the Kremlin. Panic and chaos among the occupiers. Ukrainian ballistic missiles are operating right on enemy territory. Precise and devastating strikes are coming in swarms, destroying positions. The Flamingos are ready to cut through Crimea. The Neptunes are charged to maximum power. Putin did not expect such a resounding defeat. A black cloud of disaster is hanging over the enemy forces. The defense forces are not retreating. The next explosive surprise is already on its way. Shocking details coming up.
The consequences of the war unleashed by Russia are starting to return to its own territory with Ukrainian drones and long-range missiles. The General Staff does not deny that after Belgorod, others may soon experience a blackout firsthand. And Muscovites.
This is Badioni Street. On the right, there are buildings 10, 12, and 14. Darkness. Left side of Badioni. Darkness. Left side of Badioni and Stenin Street intersection. The traffic light isn't working.
Meanwhile, two more Russian regions, Tyumen and Sverdlovsk oblasts, have introduced restrictions on gasoline sales per person, no more than 30 liters. Before this, the new regulation affected the Khabarovsk Krai, Chelyabinsk Oblast, and the occupied Crimea. All these lines and empty gas stations are due to daily attacks on oil refineries. Commander-in-Chief Syrskyi stated that in September, under the Deep Strike program, there were reports of 70 hits on Russian territory.
We are destroying the production of fuel and lubricants, explosives, and other components of the Russian military-industrial complex in the aggressor country. Among other things, oil production in Russia has decreased by 21%.
The intensification and expansion of Ukraine's so-called long-range sanctions across Russian territory became one of the main topics at the president's meeting with the security bloc.
Ukrainian long-range weaponry is becoming significantly. We are constantly working on this and have already provided a variety of opportunities for production, the necessary funding, and all the required support. We need to scale up its use in a truly tangible way. We have clear plans regarding this for the coming months. Everything must be implemented. Ukrainian precision is already visible, but there should be more. It is absolutely fair that Ukraine is striking retaliatory strikes, precision strikes, unlike Russia. We know what we want to achieve. Of course, peace.
Currently, the carriers of sanctions deep into Russian territory are the Flamingo and Neptune missiles. The company Firepoint announced the start of production of the first ones at the end of the summer. At that time, footage of the Flamingo launch also appeared online. Analysts suggested, however, that they flew into the territory of occupied Crimea. The publication Welt stated that it was these missiles that destroyed the FSB base on the peninsula. 3 missiles left craters 15 meters in diameter each.
Crimea, the peninsula exploded. Crimea, the region of
Exploded. At the same time, German journalists reported that 50 missiles are rolling off the assembly line every month with plans to ramp up to 200 per month. And then the Russians displayed what they claimed were the remains of a downed Flamingo missile. According to their information, it was hit on Russian territory by a Buk system at an altitude of 100 meters and a speed of 600 kilometers per hour. Judging by the serial number, the occupiers assume this is the 106th munition produced in September. There is no reliable confirmation that the Flamingo destroyed the FSB base. Military analysts believe that behind these successful strikes, and not only these, could be Neptune itself. Today, 3 modifications of it have already been tested and put into serial production in the Ukrainian defense industry. The 4th one is being prepared. Testing is underway now.
This is the long-range Neptune, which can reach 1,000 kilometers. It is currently undergoing testing. It has already achieved, let's say, positive hits, and further it will... The issue of putting it into serial production will be addressed in parallel. I believe this Neptune series makes the country more capable and reveals our combat potential. Because not every country in the world has cruise missiles, let alone cruise missiles that in the future will be both sea and land-based and, let's say, of various ranges.
For obvious reasons, Ukrainian weapons manufacturers do not share much information about strikes on the aggressor. Thank you. But President Zelensky has admitted to the press that the defense forces even combine them. And this, analysts admit, is a successful practice that Ukrainians can adopt from their enemy.
This missile is likely to be produced in larger quantities, but at the same time, it will be cheaper compared to the high-tech Neptune missile. And here there are a whole range of combinations. For example, the Neptune missile, being less detectable and more accurate, can be used for ARS, clearing the corridor, or even the opposite. For example, a series of Flamingo missiles, which will be highly visible but very cheap, will be used as decoy missiles to draw the enemy's air defense forces away. At the same time, while the less visible but accurate Neptune missile will slip through and deliver a targeted strike.
The Ukrainian defense industry is no longer what it was at the start of the full-scale Russian aggression. The country's military and political leadership has finally realized that only local arms manufacturers can guarantee stable weapon supplies to the front, provided there is adequate funding. But with each passing day, as more and more unknown drones terrorize EU skies, Europeans and Scandinavians are showing increased interest, not only in Ukraine's experience, but also in cooperating with Ukraine in the production of weapons suited to the realities of modern warfare.
It seems that Ukrainian weaponry is now targeting Putin's most critical assets. A swarm of drones is heading for the Black Sea Fleet, and their mission is to wipe it off the face of the sea. Our forces have gone in hard, and the Kremlin is urgently putting its troops on high alert. Mega weapons, having gained momentum over thousands of kilometers, are already taking aim at the Russian coastline. Unmanned boats are bursting into battle, and explosions are tearing through the Black Sea. The trap has snapped shut, and the enemy is teetering on the edge of the abyss. This is something you have to see with your own eyes.
The days of Russia's Black Sea Fleet are numbered. There is less and less time left until the occupiers are completely defeated. This week, Ukraine marks the 3rd anniversary of the first strike on the Crimean Bridge. On October 8, 2022, a powerful explosion rocked the crossing, seriously damaging both the road surface and the railway line. It was then that Ukraine saw the emergence of an entirely new and unique branch of the military, along with its own advanced weapon, naval drones.
As a result of the incident, vehicle traffic on the Crimean Bridge was halted.
That was when the whole world learned what Ukrainian naval drones are capable of.
Ukraine has demonstrated that its naval drones, here they are, there's probably a picture of what they look like. These naval drones are an effective weapon.
Over the past 3 years, Ukrainian naval UAVs have become the masters of the Black Sea. Meanwhile, Putin's much-vaunted Black Sea Fleet has been forced to hide from our drones in remote ports.
This is in essence a kind of army of the future. It's an element that will help save human lives and allow for more effective operations.
The effectiveness of modern Ukrainian naval weaponry is hard to dispute. Time and again, it manages to break through enemy defense systems and make its way into Russian ports and bays.
Drones, both in the air and on the ground, are highly visible. And they are targeted by automatic cannons as well. So basically, they're firing what seems to be aimed shots, but really it's just by eye. And yet they can't hit it. And this is, despite the fact that the lighting is excellent, it's clearly visible, it's moving relatively close by. They still can't hit it. It's a total disaster.
And with each new attack on Russian warships, Ukrainian drones are becoming more and more advanced technologically.
Naturally, now the entire chain will be targeted, simply because the Ukrainians have taken this on seriously. They're succeeding, they see that Russia's air defense system is failing everywhere, so why not give it a try?
Now Putin no longer has a single remote base in the Black Sea where the bunker dweller could hide his fleet from Ukrainian drones. As it has become known, Ukroboronprom has just signed a cooperation agreement with American partners, which gives Ukraine the opportunity to acquire its own resources. A completely new type of drone Ekranoplan with a range of almost 5,000 kilometers and a payload of 1 ton.
We have agreed to cooperate within the float and fly concept, and we also plan to jointly develop solutions to increase the speed and stability of our products. We are interested in developing production on the territory of Ukraine, as well as organizing training for our weapons specialists.
This news has triggered yet another wave of panic in the Kremlin. Now every military vessel and all, without exception, Russian army bases on the Black Sea are in the crosshairs of the Ukrainian armed forces.
We can clearly see that both the sheer quantity and the impressive quality of these advanced drones now effectively allow the Ukrainian military to significantly vary their strategic use and thereby create a certain more diverse mix of different types of unmanned aerial vehicles in order to achieve their objectives.
And Ukrainian soldiers, more than anyone else, know how to achieve their goals by any means necessary. It's no coincidence that they are setting global trends in naval operations. Ukraine's maritime drones have prompted other countries to adopt similar technologies. Today, our unmanned boats are the main participants in modern exercises conducted by Portugal. In full view of representatives of NATO naval forces and with the involvement of dozens of defense and technology companies and their experimental weapons, a 3-week battle is being waged for control over a notional 10,000 square miles of ocean. As a result of this prolonged sea battle, Ukrainian drones have demonstrated their highest level of effectiveness. Now, according to military experts, the experience gained by the Ukrainian armed forces will be scaled up in the Black Sea.
Ukraine has acquired, and this is now clearly confirmed by all the very recent events and developments, an exceptionally effective weapon to decisively counter Russia's significant naval monopoly and dominance. And essentially, it has undermined that monopoly.
If a year ago Ukrainian drones had effectively driven Russian fleets out of Sevastopol, now they will find no peace even in Novorossiysk. The Kremlin clearly is not keeping up with Ukraine's new maritime technologies. While Russian sailors are training to shoot at surface targets, for example, Magura drones are being equipped with machine guns, anti-aircraft, and anti-ship missiles. Some of them are even already serving as miniature aircraft carriers, acting as platforms for launching drones.
Such drones can be of various types, and moreover, they can be effectively used in large swarms in order to reliably and consistently inflict significant damage on the enemy fleet.
By invading Ukraine in 2014, Putin triggered a whole revolution in naval warfare. Over the past 3 years, Ukraine has completely rewritten the course of such battles, and its contribution to the development of naval forces is, according to Western experts, already being compared to technological breakthroughs of their time, such as the construction of submarines or even the transition from sails to steam power on ships.
They urgently launched a counterattack. Ukrainian soldiers raised the Ukrainian flag in the settlement of Mali Shcherbaki in the Zaporizhzhia direction. This was reported by the 24th Separate Assault Battalion, IDA. The military emphasized that this success was the result of clear coordination, determination, and the well-coordinated work of the units. And every such step is another page in our struggle, which continues every day despite fatigue, risks, and losses.
The shaman carefully picks up the fresh, vibrant vegetables and then proceeds to head towards the designated location.
The information was also confirmed by the commander of the Ukrainian assault forces, Colonel Valentin Manko, who published footage of the clearing operation. According to him, the military carried out a successful counteroffensive special operation, liberating Mali Shcherbaki, the territories adjacent to Shcherbaki, and partially Stepne.
Zaporizhzhia direction. These are the good news I promised. Thanks to the assault troops who carried out a successful counteroffensive special operation, liberating Mali Shcherbaki and Shcherbaki, the adjacent territories, and partially Stepne, we advanced almost 3.5 kilometers forward and more than 5 kilometers along the front. The operation is ongoing.
A cruel irony of fate. Now Putin is paying tribute not only to Chechnya, but also to Turkey. Erdogan bared his teeth, and now payments for Russian gas will remain in Turkey. According to Erdogan, the money for Russian gas will be directed toward the construction of the Akkuyu nuclear power plant, which Rosatom has been building in Turkey since 2018.
We have successfully completed the testing phase of the clearing mechanism, which will allow us to meet the financial needs of the nuclear power plant under construction, using gas payments from BODAS.
Oh, what happened to Rosatom, the richest enterprise of all time and peoples? Oh, the horror? The company is unable to independently pay for the construction of the nuclear power plant, which is estimated at $20 billion. Could it be that Rosatom is bankrupt? As it turned out, due to sanctions, the Nuclear Gas Corporation had its funds blocked in its accounts. As a result, in the summer, the builders of Akkuyu even organized a mass protest due to delayed payments. Initially, the launch of the first power unit of the nuclear power plant was planned for 2023, but after the German company Siemens refused to supply equipment for the project due to sanctions, the completion of construction was postponed to 2025 and then even to 2026. Now, even that deadline is in question. Moreover, Rosatom is negotiating the sale of 49% of the Akkuyu nuclear power plant's shares to Turkish and foreign investors. There you have it, the effects of sanctions. Putin's empire is slowly but surely crumbling. And as they say, Erdogan deserves a standing ovation, killing two birds with one stone. Both gas and the nuclear power plant for Turkey are being paid for by the Kremlin. Moreover, the president of Turkey made another unexpected statement. According to him, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Russian dictator Vladimir Putin are supposedly not yet ready for a face-to-face meeting. He said this in a conversation with journalists on board a plane returning from China, where he had met with Kremlin leader Vladimir Putin. Ankara hopes that the path to peace in Ukraine remains open.
In my bilateral meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, we discussed what could be done to end the war between Ukraine and Russia with a just peace. From the very beginning, we have always considered the possibility of ending the war between Ukraine and Russia through negotiations. The negotiations that took place in Istanbul are the clearest proof that this path remains open.
But despite all the loud statements about peace talks, the EU and NATO are preparing for military confrontation with Russia. On October 13, 2025, the annual nuclear deterrence exercise Steadfast Noon began. The host country for this year's exercises is the Netherlands. The Volkel Air Base has become the main site for the maneuvers. Air bases in Belgium and the United Kingdom are also involved. About 70 aircraft from 14 NATO countries are participating in the exercises. A total of around 2,000 military personnel will be involved.
This helps us ensure that our nuclear deterrence forces remain as reliable, safe, and effective as possible.
Meanwhile, as NATO conducts its exercises, Putin's little green men are already at the alliance's borders. Phase 0 has been launched. Has Putin really made up his mind? War is one step away from Europe. Estonia has closed its border. For more details about Russia's provocations at the borders of the Baltic states, Phase 0, and the risk of war between Russia and NATO, see the following report.
Putin's little green men are already at Estonia's doorstep. It seems the man in the bunker is preparing a Crimea 2.0 operation in Europe. Western media are publishing footage in which armed men can be seen on the road. From their uniforms, it's clear these are definitely not Russian border guards. Due to this sudden activation of unidentified Russian troops in the areas of checkpoints between Russia and Estonia, the police department has urgently closed the country's eastern borders.
We decided to close the road to prevent possible provocations and incidents. Our main goal is the safety of the Estonian population. Günther Pedosk, operational head of the southern prefecture.
The safety of their own population is the top priority for all Baltic countries. For example, Latvia is expelling at least 841 Russian citizens from the country today. We're talking about Russians who were unable to prove even a basic knowledge of the Latvian language. This EU country no longer wants to see the Kremlin's fifth column on its territory.
The stay of such Russians in Latvia will be considered illegal, and their access to social services will be cut off. If these Russians remain, they will face deportation. Madara Puk, representative of the Latvian Office of Citizenship and Migration Affairs.
Due to the possible threat of a Russian attack on NATO, the alliance is preparing to evacuate 1.2 million people. According to the authorities of Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, that's how many citizens would need to flee from war in the event of aggression from the Kremlin. We're talking about at least a 40-kilometer wide strip along the borders with Russia and Belarus. For Lithuania, this would mean a total evacuation. In that case, even the capital would fall into the potential frontline zone. However, in Vilnius, they are confident that such a scenario is unlikely.
An emergency of such scale, one that would require evacuating all of Vilnius, is unlikely to develop in a single day. So it may well be necessary to start with some localized relocations, such as the eastern outskirts of the city or even individual neighborhoods. But we proceed from the assumption that ultimately our resources must be prepared for the evacuation of all 600,000 Vilnius residents.
Meanwhile, in Estonia, which has closed its borders, local churches, schools, universities, and sports arenas are already actively preparing to receive internally displaced persons. Special transportation, trains, and buses are being allocated for this purpose. Residents are being assigned to potential evacuation points and given maps with information about evacuation routes. Europeans themselves are stocking up on provisions, first aid kits, and gathering supplies. Emergency bags in case they need to flee suddenly.
People have been talking about this for a long time already. For the past several weeks, even months. At work, everywhere. We'll see what happens. For now, we need to take care of the most urgent things.
In total, the population of the Baltic countries exceeds 6 million people. Of these, almost 2.9 million live in Lithuania, nearly 2 million in Latvia, and 1.4 million people in Estonia. In Vilnius, they are preparing evacuation plans for about a quarter of the population. In Latvia, it's a third. In Estonia, 10%. And that's taking into account the most optimistic forecasts. According to military analysts, if Putin launches a full-scale offensive against the Baltic countries, every single resident there could become a displaced person.
They have platforms for various types of missile weaponry, which can strike in the shortest possible time. As one of our sources told us, these systems can literally be rolled out of garages. For example, at the Luga military base, just 100 kilometers from the Estonian border, it would take only 5 minutes to load Iskander missiles and launch enough of them to cover the entire territory of Estonia and most of Latvia.
Meanwhile, Russian propaganda is foaming at the mouth, insisting that the Kremlin's intentions are purely peaceful and that the Baltic countries supposedly have nothing to fear. Even Bunkerny himself, putting on an innocent face, tries to reassure the West.
We have never initiated military confrontation ourselves. It's pointless, simply unnecessary, and just absurd. They can't possibly believe this. They can't possibly believe what they're saying. That Russia is planning to attack NATO, because it's impossible to believe such nonsense.
In much the same way, on the eve of February 2022, Moscow insisted they had no intention of invading Ukraine. Earlier in 2014, Putin also denied that Russian army soldiers were involved in the annexation of Crimea. So it's no surprise that as soon as the little green men appeared, the Baltic countries began preparing for the worst.
The nature of hybrid warfare is such that you might not realize whether it's already a war, a single attack, or just an accident. Like those damaged cables and communications in the Baltic Sea or the plane that recently crashed in Lithuania. An attack or an accident? Not to mention the constant problems with GPS signals in the area of the Suwałki corridor.
And to make matters worse, at NATO's border, Putin's loyal friend Alexander Lukashenko keeps adding fuel to the fire. He has just carried out yet another dirty provocation. He suddenly put the Belarusian troops on alert. The country's Ministry of Defense cheerfully reported that units are already moving out to designated areas to carry out the tasks assigned by Batka.
The armed forces units that are involved in the combat readiness check are now moving to their specifically assigned areas.
However, analysts insist that all of this is more for show than actual preparation for a real invasion. Belarus will continue to constantly escalate the situation and threaten with combat readiness checks. As for the Russian army, it is so bogged down in the war in Ukraine that the Kremlin simply doesn't have the strength to open a second front. Nevertheless, everything could change quickly.
Recruiting new soldiers takes quite a long time. But in principle, it's probably a matter of 2 or 3 weeks. Something like that. Because there are quite combat-ready units on the front in Ukraine. So all that's needed is simply to transfer them. That won't take much time. And then rearm them somehow, reorganize them.
Among experts, there is also an opinion that Russia is already preparing for war with NATO. And it might strike earlier than intelligence agencies expect. For example, the American Institute for the Study of War claims that Moscow has entered the so-called Phase Zero in preparing for a confrontation with the alliance. Russia is creating reserves and practicing new tactics of warfare without the mass use of armored vehicles, and is capable of launching new aggression without waiting for the full restoration of its army after the war with Ukraine. Whether Putin will back down or actually attack the Baltic countries, we will find out very soon.
Kaliningrad will be destroyed, said former U.S. Army Europe Commander Ben Hodges. Hodges made a shocking statement. He emphasized that an attack by Russia on NATO countries would have fatal consequences for the Russians. According to him, if Russia were to attack Poland in 2025 the same way it attacked Ukraine, NATO forces would destroy it, and Kaliningrad would be eliminated within the very first hours.
In the first hours, Kaliningrad would be gone. All Russian facilities would be destroyed. Any military facilities in Sevastopol as well.
He also emphasized that if NATO countries had shown determination from the very beginning of the full-scale invasion and immediately declared that they would provide Ukraine with everything necessary to restore its territorial integrity, and if this had become their clear and unequivocal goal, the course of events would have unfolded differently, and Ukraine's situation today would be different.
Instead, we spent years pondering things like, what if Russia uses nuclear weapons? Or maybe it's better to start negotiations. or discuss the terms for Russia's withdrawal from the occupied territories.
Meanwhile, unexpectedly, Ukraine might strike military targets in Transnistria and Kaliningrad. Shocking predictions from a Ukrainian defender. You need to hear this.
Now is the time for our response. The beginning of our response. I think we need to take an even closer look at Transnistria, an even closer look at Kaliningrad. There are legitimate military targets there that need to be struck. Strike and strike again.
Moreover, according to him, strikes on such targets that support Russian propaganda and logistics could weaken the influence of Kremlin rhetoric among its own population.
When what they see on the screen and on TV doesn't match reality, and now you're showing it, it won't be so easy to send that herd to kill Ukrainians for $2,000 in the war.
It seems that tensions are indeed rising. A secret U.S. reconnaissance plane was spotted near Russia's Kaliningrad.
Flight tracking data showed that an RC-135U combat cent took off from England early Tuesday morning, flew over the Baltic countries and circled around Kaliningrad, the Russian exclave between Poland and Lithuania, before returning to the UK.
It is known that such planes are easy to distinguish. Their crews usually consist of 2 loops: pilots, a navigator, 2 flight systems engineers, at least 10 electronic warfare officers known as Ravens, and additional technical specialists. An onboard device intercepts radio signals from foreign radars and communication channels, analyzes them, and provides analysts with data so they can see what capabilities the adversary has and come up with countermeasures. Meanwhile, NATO has officially begun the Steadfast Noon 2 nuclear exercise. It's noon in the Netherlands. Their goal is to test the alliance's readiness for nuclear deterrence and the defense of the Euro-Atlantic area. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte emphasized that aircraft from alliance countries, including modern F-35s, are participating in the maneuvers.
We conduct these exercises to ensure that our nuclear deterrent remains reliable and effective. This is also a signal to any potential adversary of NATO's readiness to defend all members of the alliance.
Panic in Europe. Russia is preparing for war with NATO. Moscow is deploying bases near Finland, transferring troops and launching drones directly over the EU. Analysts are sounding the alarm. This is the first stage of a major war. Sensational details. Stay tuned.
From fakes to provocations, Moscow is up to its old tricks again. A factory of lies, provocations, and intimidation. Russia is accelerating the phase of information and psychological preparation, the so-called Phase Zero, in its campaign to prepare for a possible war with NATO.
Russia has entered the first phase of preparation, Phase Zero. To move to a higher level of warfare than the one in which Russia is currently engaged, such as a future NATO-Russia war, write analysts at the Institute for the Study of War.
Since the autumn of 2025, Muscovy has sharply intensified its operations. From drone incursions into NATO countries' airspace to false statements by the Foreign Intelligence Service about alleged planned attacks in Europe. The latest accusation is against the United Kingdom. Supposedly, London is planning attacks by pro-Ukrainian Russians on military and civilian vessels.
The statement by the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service on October 6th follows similar false claims by the SVR regarding European countries such as Poland, Moldova, and Serbia. And in recent weeks, the SVR has started making such statements more frequently. This indicates a new pattern of coordinated actions, analysts at the Institute for the Study of War write.
These actions are not spontaneous. This is a carefully constructed strategy based on the experience of 2014 and 2022, when the Kremlin used disinformation as an artillery barrage before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Meanwhile, the alliance is stepping up its monitoring of Russian information and psychological operations, recording a surge in activity from trolls and fake networks. The campaigns are especially noticeable in Poland, Germany, Slovakia, and the Baltic states. It is precisely there that Moscow is trying to provoke war fatigue and distrust in allied commitments. Under the guise of alternative opinions and anti-globalist movements, the Kremlin is building a network of loyal speakers, bloggers, and pseudo-experts. Their task is to implant the idea that NATO is supposedly provoking Russia, that the West is tired of Ukraine, and that a new war is inevitable. In addition, rumors about mobilization and threats of nuclear weapons use are being spread in Western countries.
The undeniable fact is that Putin plans to go even further. He explicitly stated this back in December of 2021, that his overarching goal is not only the entirety of Ukraine, but also the vast regions of Eastern Europe and the strategic Arctic region as well.
This rhetoric is not just propaganda, but a tool of pressure. Moscow is testing the resilience of Western societies, the level of fear, and their readiness to respond. The louder the threat is discussed, the less people believe in it. And the easier it will be to deliver a real blow, political, economic, or military.
Everything happening now is pressure on the European Union, on our European partners, to make President Zelensky more accommodating, to get him to agree to the terms of peace proposed by the Russian Federation. 2 or 4 regions and so on. All these drones on EU territory and so forth, these are provocations, yes, absolutely right. But these are indeed deliberate attempts to exert significant and sustained pressure on various European countries, and more broadly on the entire European Union, so that they too would ultimately be somewhat more accommodating and perhaps even more flexible in their overall diplomatic and economic relations with the Russian Federation. Provocations from Russia have not stopped the flow of Russian gas, liquefied Russian gas, LNG, which is going to Belgium, the Netherlands, France, and Spain. After all, none of these countries has actually declared, we are stopping the purchase of Russian gas. All of this continues. That's why I don't believe in war.
For now, one thing is clear. The Kremlin is testing the waters, but no one knows what will happen tomorrow. These actions could easily turn into real strikes. And for now, this is not a direct attack, but psychological preparation for one. Its goal is to destabilize the information space, to sow panic, distrust, and a sense of the inevitability of a new war. Right now, the future of the entire continent depends on the reaction of Western politicians.
Share your opinion in the comments, like the video, and stay up to date with the main news. There's more to come. Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Ukrainian armed forces advanced in Zaporizhzhia, a breakthrough of 3.5 kilometers. The Ukrainian flag has been raised. A bunch of occupiers were taken prisoner. Watch the report for all the details from the front line.
Russia has intensified assaults on almost all fronts. Mechanized columns have been deployed again, and once again the enemy's equipment was destroyed. How partisan intelligence helped repel the massive offensive near Vovchansk. Mountains of enemy equipment destroyed near Dobropilya, and the critical situation with Russian mobilization. Find out what life is like on the front today, right now. The Russian army is attacking along the entire front line, but is making almost no progress anywhere. This is reported by the Institute for the Study of War. The next Russian General Staff offensive was planned in particular in the Kharkiv region. Near Vovchansk, the enemy had amassed enough forces for a breakthrough, but lost even before the offensive began. Atesh partisans report that their agent from the 82nd Motorized Rifle Regiment was able to transmit the exact coordinates of Russian artillery positions, armored vehicles, and locations where the occupiers were stationed. As a result, Ukraine's defense forces were able to prepare in advance for possible offensive actions and strike back at the enemy. As a result of the effective work of the Ukrainian military, the Russians' plan collapsed before it even began.
By taking advantage of the weather conditions, uncomfortable weather, the lack of, for example, the usual intensity of our drones operations, because the drones simply either won't be able to see or won't be able to take off, the enemy will try to carry out more active assault operations. In fact, including the use of mechanized components, which we are already observing today in certain areas of the front.
At the same time, the situation remains tense in the area around the city of Kupiansk. There too, our military is observing an enemy buildup, as they repeatedly try to increase their presence in the settlement. However, despite constant attempts to launch new assaults, Russia has made no progress in this direction.
Unfortunately, the enemy has managed to reach the outskirts of the city. You know that fighting continues there in the northwestern and northern parts of the city. The enemy is also trying to infiltrate the central part of Kupiansk with sabotage and reconnaissance groups. The situation is very difficult. The goal is the same, to break out into open operational space and try to advance further through Kharkiv region. The attempt to seize the city, the attempt to control Kupiansk as a key hub, is also about logistics. In other words, it's an attempt to cut off our logistics and create unfavorable conditions for those troop groupings that are located in particular at this section of the front and in neighboring areas.
The Dobropilia direction is probably the hottest spot on the front today. In the past 24 hours, intense fighting has broken out there for the settlement of Vladimirovka. It is from there that the Russians are trying to break through to their forces who remain encircled here.
An additional problem was the landing of paratroopers, Deep State adds. The Russians brought between 50 and 75 infantrymen into the village. The situation remains difficult. Analysts warn that the Russian armed forces will try to take full advantage of the worsening weather conditions. Later, the First Corps of the Azov National Guard reported that they had managed to hold Vladimirovka.
According to the Corps statement, the Russians launched their assault with 35 units of heavy armored vehicles, including tanks and armored fighting vehicles. As a result of defensive actions, 1 armored recovery vehicle, 3 tanks, and 16 enemy armored fighting vehicles were destroyed or damaged. The Russians also lost 41 motorcycles and 2 light vehicles. Near the neighboring town of Pokrovsk, Russian forces also decided to amass troops. A group of infantry on motorcycles was sent to break through. As a result, 13 motorcyclists were eliminated, and no advance was made. Here's another epic video from Donetsk region, Ukrainian drones versus Russian tanks. The Ukrainian armed forces showed how our troops destroyed half a dozen enemy tanks and a Grad multiple rocket launcher system. The video was published by the UAV forces of the Ukrainian armed forces. Thus, in the Donetsk direction, operators of the 427th Separate Regiment of Unmanned Systems Rayrog stopped the enemy's assault actions by knocking out 5 tanks at once, thereby depriving the infantry groups of cover and making further advance impossible, according to the report. In addition, the military delivered an effective strike against a BM-21 Grad multiple launch rocket system while the enemy was firing at the positions of the Ukrainian army. According to the command, the defense forces have now managed to gain a tactical advantage in this area. At the same time, our troops are operating not only along the front line but also in the rear of the Russian grouping. Thus, in occupied Donetsk, a large-scale fire broke out after drone strikes. According to local residents, plumes of black smoke could be seen from anywhere in the city. It is known that the former hypermarket was hit, the Auchan near the Sloviansk-Donetsk-Mariupol bypass road. However, residents reported online that after the strikes, they clearly heard further detonations, and the night before, they had seen a concentration of military vehicles near the store. It is known that as a result of the fire, the building's roof collapsed and the premises were completely burned out. Meanwhile, in Russia, against the backdrop of failures at the front, the pace of mobilization has sharply declined. Recruitment into the ranks of the occupiers has dropped almost threefold, which is already being felt by units at the front, said Ivan Timochka, head of the Council of Reservists of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. According to him, the Russian Federation is trying to solve this problem in several ways. In particular, they have passed a bill in the first reading that allows for conscription mobilization throughout the year. Timochka says that Russia may use conscripts, including in the war against Ukraine.
In the last 2 quarters, they have been recruiting 30,000 to 35,000 per quarter, not even per month. Whereas before, they used to recruit that number in a month, and now it takes 3 months. So now they are recruiting 10,000 to 12,000 per month.
At the same time, military analysts note that in the Russian information space, they no longer even hide the prospects for newly mobilized soldiers, openly stating that, on average, they are expected to live less than 2 weeks after signing the contract.
The mayor of the city of Strizhevo in the Tomsk region has reached a new level of candor. He honestly said that new contract soldiers are needed to replace those who have been killed and wounded. According to the head of the city, on Friday he recruits new people, and on Monday they bury the old ones. War correspondent Romanov gave a more detailed explanation of why people are constantly needed at the front. The life expectancy of an assault soldier is 12 days. That's from signing the contract, training at the range, and the assault itself, singularly. Usually there is only one assault.
And this statistic is relentlessly confirmed by the Ukrainian armed forces. According to the General Staff, in the past 24 hours, the occupiers have lost more than 1,200 of their soldiers. In total, Russian losses have surpassed 1,122,000 people.
The Ukrainian counteroffensive is in full swing. Zelensky made an important statement. A counteroffensive operation is underway in the Dobropilya direction, which has thwarted Russia's summer-autumn offensive. The enemy's losses are colossal. These numbers are shocking.
There was a long report today, including from Commander-in-Chief Alexander Syrsky. We spoke with him for almost an hour. We discussed all the frontline directions, the preparation of our brigades, and logistics. Special attention is now, of course, on the Dobropilya operation, the counteroffensive operation. Since it began, and up to today, the Russians have already suffered more than 12,000 losses. And that's just there, only in the Pokrovsk and Dobropilya areas, specifically since August 21st. Of these 12,000, they have more than 7,200 irretrievable losses. We also defend ourselves in all other directions. Kupiansk. I want to thank each of our soldiers who are now fighting in the city and on the outskirts. The Novopavlovskoye direction is also difficult, and our active defensive operations continue there.
The peak momentum of the Russian troops' offensive is fading along the entire front line, said Ivan Timochka, head of the Council of Reservists of the Ukrainian Ground Forces.
This does not mean that it will disappear instantly, but they are currently unable to build up their offensive potential. Even if we talk about the liberated village in the Dnipropetrovsk region, where the enemy was taken prisoner, it is also worth mentioning the Dobropilya direction. There, the salient that the enemy once created is now divided, with enemy groups in operational or even complete encirclement, and the clearing of the area continues.
Russian generals are capturing Ukrainian towns and villages only on paper. Key positions and logistical hubs remain under the control of the Ukrainian armed forces. Moreover, Ukraine's defense forces are advancing rapidly. The occupiers are having a hard time in the Dnipropetrovsk, Zaporizhzhia, and Slobodansky directions. The enemy is being forced to retreat in disgrace. The occupiers' equipment and manpower are in shambles. Watch all the latest details right now.
Time is no longer on the Kremlin side, and in a prolonged standoff, Ukraine's chances of winning the war are much higher than Putin's. This is the conclusion reached by Western journalists who visited the positions of the Ukrainian armed forces. Ukraine's strategy in the war of attrition is showing unexpected results.
Armored combat vehicles. Well, it's not that they're completely obsolete, but they have almost no chance of any success, especially if they're trying to form some kind of assault groups.
Constant enemy losses and the adaptation of the Ukrainian armed forces to modern combat tactics, analysts say, open up opportunities for Kyiv's long-term victory. Russia was counting on a rapid advance in northeastern Ukraine. However, key cities and logistical hubs remain under the control of the Ukrainian armed forces. Russian generals, by the fall of 2025, are capturing Ukrainian towns and villages only in words and in fake reports for the man in the bunker.
It's abundantly clear that the Russian military forces are highly unlikely to be able to successfully accomplish these particular tasks. However, General Gerasimov, who is the chief of the General Staff, according to certain significant leaks that have recently appeared on various social media platforms, reportedly presented a detailed report to President Putin about another round of successes by Russian troops. He specifically claimed, quite emphatically, that the significant grouping of Ukrainian armed forces, positioned strategically near the Klebenbyk reservoir, had been completely and utterly destroyed, which in actual fact is simply not true at all. And in addition, he further claimed that Russian troops are actively clearing the southern districts of the city of Kupiansk, which, it should be noted, is also not true.
What is actually happening in the long-suffering but still unyielding Kupiansk was shown by operators of the 8th Special Operations Forces Regiment. The enemy in this direction truly does not stop trying to break through the Ukrainian defenses. In the Kupiansk direction, there were at least 8 attempted attacks by the occupiers over the past day. However, the Ukrainian armed forces managed to thwart the enemy's plans to advance. The defense forces repelled assault actions in the areas of Petropavlivka, Novoplatonivka, Pishchanove, and Stepna Novoselivka. Using strike FPV drones, the occupiers were driven into the nearest building, after which operators cleared out several structures where the enemy had taken cover. The occupiers are also having a tough time today in the Zaporizhzhia direction. Their partisans from the Atesh movement helped destroy the enemy's mobile command post. Concerned citizens provided the exact coordinates of the occupiers' communications vehicle, which was being used as a mobile command post to control enemy units. The destruction of this communications hub caused chaos in the occupiers' command system. Coordination between units and the transmission of orders were disrupted, which seriously affected the enemy's combat capability in this sector of the front. And here are the shots of the occupiers' fuel and lubricants depot burning in the northern Slobozhansky direction. In the past few days, our border guards have managed to destroy enemy hideouts and communication equipment. In addition, the enemy has suffered personnel losses in the northern Slobozhansky direction. Overall, in this and the Kursk directions, Ukrainian defenders repelled 7 Russian attacks. The enemy carried out several airstrikes on our positions, dropping a total of 9 guided bombs and conducting 198 artillery shellings. The situation remains difficult in the Lyman direction. There, the enemy attacked 12 times, trying to advance near the settlements of Srednyaya, Novoselovka, and Derilova. Nevertheless, Ukraine's military intelligence special unit manages to accurately and effectively destroy enemy forces, their equipment, and drones. Due to heavy losses in this and other directions, Russian troops have been forced to slow down their offensive pace, military analysts explain.
As a result of September, Russian activity on the front has somewhat decreased. The number of assaults they carry out is directly proportional to the number of personnel losses they suffer.
The official Ukrainian statistics also do little to encourage the occupiers to launch these meat grinder assaults. For example, September 2025 turned out to be a telling moment in terms of the effectiveness of National Guard units. Thanks to the coordinated work of the guardsmen, the enemy has lost at least 677 vehicles, 418 artillery systems, nearly 200 radars, 17 multiple rocket launchers, 29 tanks, and almost 70 ammunition depots over the past month. Meanwhile, the Russian army continues to strike exclusively at civilians and residential buildings. And it should be noted that this is happening not only in Ukraine. The day before, Russia's much-vaunted air defense system hit a residential building in the Belgorod region with a missile. The video shows the upper floors of the residential building taking the hit. As a result, according to Russian media, windows were blown out in 15 apartments. 24 parked cars were damaged, but officially there were no casualties. However, judging by the footage published online, the destruction of the building may be much more severe.
With each passing day, it is becoming harder and harder to wage war in Russia. There is no equipment and the human resources are also running out. That's why Putin has decided to assemble a foreign legion of death. You will be shocked when you find out whom the bunker dweller has recruited into his army. Watch right now to see how Erefia turns mercenaries into cannon fodder.
There has been an addition to the ranks of allies fighting for Erefia. This time they come from far away Latin America, from Cuba.
They have been fighting since the 1960s, ever since Fidel Castro came to power. After coming to power in Cuba, Cuban soldiers fought in Latin America, and then Fidel Castro had the idea to land the Cuban army in Africa, spark an uprising there, and turn all of Africa communist. There were such delusional ideas. For Cubans, given the country's absolute poverty, war is one of the ways to make money.
According to classified US State Department documents reviewed by Reuters, Havana is not just supporting the Kremlin's policy. It may have sent up to 5,000 of its citizens to fight in the war against Ukraine.
I knew the contract was real when I arrived. The Russian Federation brought me here. Everyone here knew why they came. I know that for sure. Everyone knew they were coming to war.
This is Enrique Gonzalez. He joined the ranks of the Russian army to make some money by killing Ukrainians.
I found out my son had been recruited the day he left. I don't know how this process happened because he never told me anything. I realized it when he was at the airport. He called me and told me everything.
The active recruitment of Cubans for the war began back in 2023. This happened after the Russian dictator signed a decree allowing foreigners who joined the army to obtain Russian citizenship through an expedited process. After that, dozens of Cubans rushed off to war.
Poverty forces you. If we didn't live in such poverty, I'm sure these people wouldn't have gone to Russia. But as it is, you work and work and work. My husband worked hard in Cuba, but one day he told me, I can't take it anymore. I asked him what had happened. He replied, don't worry, I know what I'm doing. That's the kind of man my husband was.
According to available information, recruitment centers are located in different regions. Candidates are promised salaries from $1,500 to $2,500 a month. Citizenship or residency, benefits in case of injury, and other perks. For some companies, Moscow creates entire package deals. Payment, housing, legalization, all of this makes the offer attractive to economically vulnerable people.
The method of luring foreign soldiers is quite simple. They target the poorest countries, meaning Latin America or Africa, or even Asian countries, I mean North Korea. They offer more or less competitive payments, and people are willing to go fight. After all, it's not just about the Cubans who, there are about 5,000 of them, according to the numbers available online. We're talking about around 3,000 North Korean military personnel and several thousand mercenaries from African countries.
Intermediaries, including travel agencies, are recruiting thousands of foreign mercenaries for what is called Russia's elite international battalion. They use flashy advertising campaigns, promises of high earnings, and tricks when signing contracts. Recruitment and agitation mainly take place through Telegram, according to the Los Angeles Times.
The advertisement was simple. Sign up for a year to fight on Russia's side in the Special Military Operations Zone, that is, in the war in Ukraine, and receive citizenship, free medical care, money, and land, according to the Los Angeles Times article.
But not everything is done honestly. Contracts for foreigners are often drafted in such a way that they cannot fully understand them. They provide a translator, but there is no Wi-Fi. After arriving at the front, requests to terminate the contract require a payment of up to $6,000. Another method recruiters use is student and tourist visas. Many foreigners initially come to Russia on these visas and then sign a contract with the Russian Ministry of Defense. They are met by brokers and Russian officers right at the airports. To motivate new mercenaries, recruiters publish messages about supposed victories of the Russian army while concealing defeats. Despite all the risks, foreigners' interest does not disappear. Meanwhile, the US is stepping up diplomatic efforts to neutralize the Cuban factor in Russia's war against Ukraine. The Donald Trump administration is mobilizing American diplomats to fight against the UN resolution, calling for the lifting of the long-standing trade embargo on Cuba. A document from the State Department emphasizes that Cuba uses international initiatives such as the annual UN resolution to present itself as a victim of sanctions, even though in reality its citizens are involved in combat operations on the side of the aggressor.
The Cuban regime was unable to protect its citizens from being used as pawns in the Russia-Ukraine war, a State Department representative stated.
Every recruited soul is not just a number in the statistics. For the Kremlin, it's a chance to get ahead. Moscow is systematically expanding the pool of foreigners willing to fight for its interests. For the terrorist state, such people are nothing more than cheap labor and cannon fodder. For the mercenaries, it's a chance to make easy money.
Erdogan will end the war in Ukraine. Trump made a sensational statement. US President Donald Trump called Turkish President Erdogan one of the leaders who could help resolve the war unleashed by Russia against Ukraine. Erdogan can, the US president replied to a journalist's question about whether other world leaders, particularly the Turkish president, could help in peacefully resolving the war between Russia and Ukraine. Trump noted that Recep Erdogan is respected even in the Kremlin.
Putin respects him, and he's my friend.
Only with strong, not weak leaders, and is convinced that Erdogan also has a good attitude toward him.
You know, when NATO has problems with Erdogan, which happens quite often, they call me to talk to him. And I have never failed to resolve these issues right away.
By the way, Erdogan has always shown who's boss, even when dealing with Putin. An urgent call to the bunker dweller turned into a real ultimatum. Meanwhile, the Turkish company Baykar has unveiled a new drone with a Ukrainian engine. The drone is already undergoing tests and could become a weapon of retribution for the Ukrainian armed forces. The Russians are already in a panic. More on this in our report.
Urgent call from Erdogan. The first details of this conversation have already become known. The Turkish leader took an unexpected step. In the emergency call, Erdogan demanded that Putin stop the bloody war and switch to diplomacy. Ankara has once again officially stated that Turkey is ready to take on a key role in peace negotiations on Ukraine. During the dialogue, the leaders also discussed bilateral relations and global threats. But most importantly, Erdogan made it clear that the patience of countries is running out. The president of Turkey also added that his country will continue to work in the interest of peace.
The president of Turkey stated that in order to achieve a just and lasting peace in the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, it is necessary to intensify diplomatic efforts.
And the day before, it became known that the Turkish company Baykar has begun testing the third prototype of the Kizil Elma drone, equipped with high-precision aviation weaponry and a new Ukrainian engine. The footage of the test was released by the company's press service. The reconnaissance and strike drone completed a flight carrying a 250-kilogram aerial bomb, which was equipped with an external correction system. According to the company, with the new, more powerful engine, the Kizil Elma will approach the speed of sound, and thanks to aerodynamic improvements, it will be able to perform more complex maneuvers at higher speeds. In 2021, the Turkish company Baykar ordered jet engines from the Ukrainian state enterprise Ivchenko Progress to be installed on the drone. At the same time, engine deliveries continued into 2024. This is one of the most important projects of the Turkish defense industry and has already caused a serious wave of concern in Russia. Russian media, noting that the aircraft is undergoing tests with a Ukrainian-made engine, believe that if Turkey hands over the Kizil Elma to Ukraine as a gesture of friendship, it would be the worst-case scenario for Russia. The Russian press points out that Turkish UAVs with Ukrainian engines highlight the military cooperation between Turkey and Ukraine. At the same time, Ukrainian media note that Ukrainian-made engines give the aircraft additional power, strengthening the friendship between the two countries. It was also mentioned that Baykar has decided to build a manufacturing plant in Ukraine, where the Kizil Elma and other drones for the Ukrainian army may be produced in particular. Against this backdrop, it became known that the Bayraktars have returned to the front. Reportedly, Bayraktar drones, after a long pause, are once again being used in strike operations against Russian forces. Thus, medium-altitude, long-endurance drones struck a Russian boat and a unit on the Black Sea coast.